Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Pop Culture Minefield. That's Keith,
And that's scary.
and we are here to talk about some nerdy nerd stuff. Today, we got hit with some interesting shit with the Lucasfilm president says that Colin Trevorrow left The Rise of Skywalker because he was at a huge disadvantage. So let's dig into this. Keith sent this to me a little while ago. Now that it's already known that Colin Trevorrow was originally set to direct The Rise of Skywalker, but had left the production and was replaced with J.J. Abrams. There isn't much known about the issue, but Lucasfilm President Kathleen Kennedy shares further explanation of what exactly happened. In a recent interview with IO9, Kennedy was asked why things didn't work with the Jurassic World director. Quote, well, I wouldn't say it didn't work, end quote, she said. Kennedy claims Trevorrow was at a huge disadvantage because he was not part of The Force Awakens and in other early conversations, considering that they already had a general sense of where the story was going. She admitted that when they were looking at the first draft, they realized that it was heading in a direction where most of them didn't feel it was somewhere they wanted to go. She continued, and we're on a schedule, pointing out that it's a tough decision on whether or not they would actually get there in time. Man, this guy, whoever wrote this article, who is this? Loves breaking up his it's her, Judith Ann Dela Cruz, likes to break up her quotes. Did you notice that? They're breaking up the quotes like that? It's like, in order to guide the narrative, you have to break up the quotes. It's bad journalism.
Yeah.
She admit I worked in journalism, so just so you guys know. Reiterating the reason Trevorrow didn't end up directing episode 9, she said the director was also at a disadvantage because he hadn't been immersed in everything that they already had planned out, starting with The Force Awakens. It isn't exactly surprising for a big franchise, such as Star Wars, to have some creative turnovers in the process of deciding and making projects. It's also understandable to make these choices, especially when a big project is under a time crunch. So it makes sense that they would choose Abrams to direct the final installment of...
Okay, wait.
You want me to stop there?
Yeah, let's just stop there. There's a lot to unpack, so let me just officially say, on behalf of myself, bullshit.
Yeah.
As I had pointed out after reading the story, let me get this straight. Back, many years before most people watching this were probably born, George Lucas was able to plan out doing his trilogy with two different directors and expand the story, with one of them, Richard Marquand, having already been set direct and appeared in a picture with Lucas and the director of Empire, who was
You're talking about Irvin Kershner. He was he was one of his teachers in school.
Yeah. All three of them appeared in a picture on set in Empire. So they were, Lucas was able to get this planned out and have two other directors that were able to come in, work out exactly how he wanted things, and make all three movies. And you're telling me that by 2015, 2016, 2017, you couldn't do that same thing. That's a little off to me. Colin
Right.
is a professional director. He's someone that has handled a film that realistically had probably as many visual effects in it as any Star Wars film.
Yeah.
It just seems highly unlikely that the main reason why he couldn't do his movie, he couldn't make his movie, is because he wasn't around for the initial planning. Seems to me, from everything that I understood, it wasn't like Rian Johnson was initially involved when they were doing The Force Awakens.
Yeah, he wasn't there, so how come he could get it?
I have my professional thought and then my personal thought on how that happened. The professional portion of it is that basically Kathleen Kennedy had decided to allow Rian Johnson to just go off and do whatever he needed to do, and which supports the theory that JJ's role in doing this was to help initially map out the initial idea for the trilogy, but that the understanding was that he was only doing the first film and then he was gone.
Yep.
And with Rian Johnson, he and Kathleen obviously have some sort of a connection. And so she allowed him to basically do whatever he needed or wanted to do. And that Colin Trevorrow probably was someone who she felt no connection to.
Well, that first meeting between him and her was like, "You're woke? I'm woke too."
I don't think Colin Trevorrow is one of those woke people.
No, I'm talking about Rian Johnson.
Yeah, Rian Johnson, yeah.
Rian Johnson's like, I'm woke like you. And they bonded and had much tea together. And Trevorrow, on the other hand, and I know this too, because this was coming down the line from the likes of Doomcock and Gary Beekler, and that basically Trevorrow had a script and he was trying to defend the script. That these things are supposed to happen later, like Skywalker, Luke Skywalker, and Kathleen Kennedy and Rian Johnson decided to abandon JJ's plan because they're like, well, he's gone. He's not going to work on the trilogy. Let's throw out his 3-arc story and just what's that called? Throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
And so Trevorrow lost his film. And I think that he was unceremoniously asked to leave. I don't think he was fired. They were like, we don't need your bitching. So,
and the thing is that I think Trevorrow is probably, again, no insult to, really no insult to Kathleen Kennedy, nor to Rian Johnson. But I think Colin Trevorrow, up to that point, was one of the few people that had actually handled a film that was as technically difficult as any of the more recent Star Wars films that had been produced up to that point.
Right.
And his thing was, you need to really, he came from the angle of, you got to plan it out. You already have a lot of stuff going. The wheels are technically in motion. It's not that easy to make changes. But on top of everything else, I think his thing was, this was a guy who signed up to do this based on the outline that had been presented.
Yeah, JJ had put out. Whether you agree with his story arc or not, he actually did have a plan. And to say that he didn't is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I dislike the fact that JJ acts like what Rian didn't derail his plan. And it's like, I call bullshit on that. But he's got to play diplomacy and he's an enlightened, woke individual as well. So he doesn't want to throw them under the bus. But there's going to come a time where all this shit's going to come out. And I'm surprised more of it didn't come out in Bob Iger's book. But in
Well,
closing, what do you want to say?
in closing, I think any problems that this movie has is born completely of the fact that you had people working behind the scenes who felt that their message and what they wanted to do was more important than the actual work and technical aspects of what these films required and what Colin Trevorrow had basically agreed on with them that they decided to break faith with. That to me it just sucks.
Yep.
And it's really just bad. It's just bad business. You can't run anything like that. I have said things in the past. I am not one of these people that actually believe that Kathleen Kennedy should be fired. I think she's more of a manager. And I'm using this to say that this is one more reason why she should never be involved with the creative end of everything going on with anything that Lucasfilm produces. She is a very good manager. She can continue to keep the company running. As long as she doesn't lose money, it's all.
And I got to say, I think that promoting her out of the job is probably the smartest thing that they could do.
Yeah.
So, well, there we have it. Epic Stream's little bullshit story. No, no serious Star Wars nerd is going to buy that little journalistic epic story of how Colin Trevorrow just wasn't prepared.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
whatever.
Again, as of this recording, there are 9 days until this film comes out. And already, from what I have been hearing from the Japanese premiere, that a lot of the stuff that we had heard as far as some of the leaks are pretty much true.
And Midnight's Edge just published a video. I sent it to you. Talking about what went on in Sweden and all the leaks and people who've seen the film, and it just looks really depressing what they've done. And and nobody's got nobody deserves blame more than Disney. Disney, they can get mad all they want to at Lucasfilm. They let this stuff happen. They goaded some of this thing into happening. The only thing good they've done, smart-wise, that they've done so far is The Mandalorian. And they better get on the block, man, because I'll tell you what, after Clone Wars and Mandalorian, what do they got? Because Clone Wars is coming, in January, the new season. So, and they call it a new season. It's actually what they did is the season they didn't get to finish when Disney canceled Clone Wars because they wanted control. And so now they're going to bring it back and for one season. And, of course, headed up by Dave Filoni. The one guy we know so far gets Star Wars and gets
along
the
with
fans.
Jon Favreau.
And Favreau has proven his mettle, too, with The Mandalorian.
I think ultimately there should be a different approach for this. I think Favreau and Filoni should be placed in charge ASAP. Now, no major announcements will come between now and the end of the year. But
not until her actual, because she's supposed to step down at some point. And
I think she'll keep her job. It's just that I think it'll be suggested that she no longer.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
In the creative aspect of it. Now, that said, that will then allow them to quietly move her out of that job later on. You don't want to remove her from her job now because that would create a whole lot of extra chaos.
Because of how, it also create a firestorm within the media. Because the media is absolutely bought and sold on this whole woke stuff. So they would see that as an attack on wokeism.
Well, not just woke, but I mean it's more of a business thing. A lot of the corporations.
Well, I don't think that's what the media would have a beef with.
Well, I think a lot of the corporate media companies protect each other. it's kind of like an unwritten rule. You don't want to really look that bad unless you do something that is just downright dumb, and then you got to get
I get you.
And so this is more of a corporate move, and this is more of an attempt, sort of like, this isn't like the situation with, say, Les Moonves. He was just a dumb A for what he did. For years and years of doing what he did, and he got found out, and there's no way to cover that up. You got to cover it, especially in light of everything with Harvey
busted.
Yeah. But with Kathleen Kennedy, it's not like she really broke a law or anything. So you want to kind of shuffle her off to the side and sort of like just play it off like, okay, we attempted something. It may not go that well. But hey, guess what? Look over here. We have Dave Filoni. We have Jon Favreau. And guess what? They're going to make a deal, and they're going to bring in Kevin Feige for one movie and make one of his ideas.
Because or possibly a trilogy, because that's one of the things.
Possibly a trilogy. But at this point, I will be very surprised if Rian Johnson is ever allowed to make anything Star Wars. It's as long as Disney owns anything, or as long as Bob Iger is running everything.
Right.
I think
I don't see that ever happening. I mean, you saw what I wrote on my page today that all the critics, 97% critics loved it. 92% of audiences loved it, and his movie Knives Out tanked out.
Yeah. And well, I mean, again, it was a cheaper movie to make, and while it
should have been, it was shot for $55 million, and there's no way that it should have been shot for that much. I mean, you look at the original Murder on the Orient Express. I was talking to Jeff Haller over at Film Dumpster about this. I said that was shot for $1.4 million. That's $7 million by today's dollars. And they had an all-star cast, including Sean Connery. So it's like, for a film to be made like that and have an all-star cast, and it's a genre-specific film, the murder mystery thing, which typically doesn't do all that well, really never has. People like them, but keep the budget down so you don't lose as much. And once again, this is Rian Johnson overspending. I mean, $55 million, that's at least 15 to 20 million more than what they should have spent on it. And if they had only spent 20 to 25 million, the film would be making a serious profit right now.
There's only two people in that cast that are people that can command huge amounts of money to be in movies.
Number one, Daniel Craig.
And number two is Chris Evans.
Yep.
And that's about it.
And they would have done it, I guarantee you, they would have done it for 2% or whatever on the back end. And that way they could have cut the budget down. I'm not going to get into film economics, but the fact is that was dumb. It was dumb shooting that film for over $35 million.
Yeah. And again, we haven't, it's not like this is really going to hurt Rian Johnson's career or any of the other people involved with it. Look, JJ, no matter how this turns out, he's good because now he's Warner Brothers' problem. And I think in the end, the only people that are going to get hurt are the Star Wars fans and Kathleen Kennedy. And that's it. I think Colin Trevorrow didn't participate. He wasn't allowed to participate. And again, I can't say anything about knowing what his plan was, but
well, we know that it's not in that film because if it were, they wouldn't have had to rewrite so much. So,
I think a lot of that was just the woke stuff. I think Colin Trevorrow's reaction is more akin to what, again, it seems like everything that we learned about what George Lucas had originally planned, if you cut out all the stuff about the midichlorians and other tiny creatures, and you kept to the story that it looked like he was trying to tell, it looks like JJ tried to basically use that as the skeleton with which to hang everything on. And that the only major difference is instead of having the original characters in this mysterious girl, who went under another name in Lucas's version, you call her Rey, You get rid of the classic characters of Luke, Leia, Han, and you replace those characters with this girl, with Finn and Poe, and you sort of move that forward. And that's basically what they did, and just nothing but huge cameos and a different direction for everything. But I think the third film and the third act were really meant to be something different. And that this is the part that a lot of those people who say they're woke should understand. Okay? George Lucas's third film, the final film, in his original idea, was meant to be Luke and Leia versus the big bad of the third act. So that everything that happens in this film has been changed from what Lucas originally had, which was Luke and Leia as Jedis fighting the big bad, with Luke sacrificing himself, and so that Leia could win against the bad guy and start her own version of the new Jedi Order with this girl, or Rey, as the first apprentice to her. That was the end of everything. And it made more sense to do it that way, to build up after all these movies for the chosen one to technically really be the twins together, and for one of them to sacrifice themselves for the other. That's the way it should have gone. That's not the movie we got, and they've had to basically bend and stretch and contort to be able to make it fit. And nobody can come up with anything better.
And it looks like, when you watch the Midnight's Edge video, you'll see, you can see where they stole from the EU again. So, but with that, we've already gone 10 minutes past the wrap up. So, that's it for right now. Epic Stream's full of crap. Kathleen Kennedy is a liar, and it looks like this movie's doomed. It really does. I don't want to say doomed. This movie's definitely going to make a lot of money. I'm not saying it is doomed. It looks doomed. It really does. Let's cross our fingers and hope everybody's full of shit. With that, that's Keith.
And that's Gary.
And we're out of here.
Yeah, hold on.